Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. This month is coming to an end, which means it's time for another episode chosen by the Patreon's Quasar Commander, its most illustrious tier. These last few months, we've been covering the themes found in the World Legacy storyline, and we're swiftly approaching its conclusion. Ningirsu, in an attempt to seize the power of the World Legacies to revive his sister, drops the World Wand from orbit to crack the planet's surface, looking to get into its sweet nougaty center for massive eldritch power. Now, dropping something of that size from space would normally unalive everyone in a 100-mile radius, but Imduk, ever the faithful companion, shielded everyone with a power that was fueled by its very life force. But that wouldn't be their end, as the World Ark, the legacy that held power over death itself, absorbed Imduk's body, turning it into a Guardragon, an action that would ripple across all the rest of the World Legacy artifacts, transforming them into draconic vessels as well. Premiering in earnest in the February 2019 core set, Savage Strike, this wave of cards that would inevitably be scooped up by Dragon Link lists had a varying impact on the metagame. While the main deck monsters didn't cause much of a splash, two of their extra deck monsters are currently forbidden for their ability to cheat out some truly outrageous monsters. So, you know, classic Dragon Archetype shenanigans going on here. I think Varus is still trying to piece together what's left of Rockets after Dragon Link stripped it for all its best parts. But how's the theme supposed to work, you know, normally? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. We'll toot our flute to summon some dragons, see how they operate while they're on guard dragon duty, then find some friends that can really get them into the zone. It's time to point out some good cards with Guardragon Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So what's the deal with Guardragons? Well, they're a series of dragon monsters, which might seem obvious, but you can't take that for granted. Like most decks in the Vrain's era, the main goal is to facilitate link summons, this time by incorporating normal monsters and dragon flavoring into the mix, with the link monsters focusing on mobilizing more powerful dragons to close out the game, though there is an additional mini-game surrounding them, requiring you to be very precise about your zone placements, which we'll get more into once we cover those monsters. First, let's talk about those main deck ones, starting with Guardragon Justicia, a level 2 water normal tuner monster with 0 attack and 2100 defense. Its flavor text reads, "The fate of the world depends on the Guardragons, born from the World Legacy." Wow, some actual thematic flavor text, who would have thought? This might have been our go-to option for a normal monster since it's on theme, but the funny thing about Guardragons is that none of their effects actually check for the name Guardragon. They either work with normals, dragons, or normal dragons, so you could swap this out with Galaxy Serpent and very few people would notice the difference. Though, in its defense, it does have a whopper of a defense stat, so maybe run one or two. You know, Justician case. Alright, time for the effect monsters. Guardragon Promenesis is a level 1 fire monster with 500 attack and 200 defense, and you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave, then target a dragon monster you control, and it gains 500 attack and defense until the end of your opponent's turn. And if any number of normal monsters are sent to your grave while this card is in the grave, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field. So this is worse Salamangreat Spinny, right? I mean, look at them. They both have an in-hand effect that boosts a monster's attack, but is primarily to set up its grave summoning effect. Okay, yeah, you can send Promenesis from the field to the grave, but what's the point of that? Heck, you can't even do that if you revive it with its own effect because it doesn't tribute itself, it has to be sent to the grave, which, you know, it won't be. But for the theme itself, it does make for a nice extender, since you can normal Justicia, use Promenesis to boost it before linking Water Dragon away for a link 1, which will then trigger Prom, getting you some more free material. And notably, it doesn't care how the normal monster ends up in the grave, or what type it is, so you can send it to the grave with Dragon Shrine for all it cares. If it was a tuner itself, I could see it having a load of utility in a number of decks, but without that special property, Promenesis isn't going to be very prominent. World Chalice Guardragon is a level 1 wind monster with 400 attack and defense, and when a card or effect is activated that targets your linked monster as a quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. You can also banish this card from your grave, then target a normal monster in your grave and special summon it in defense position to your zone a link monster points to. Aw, we haven't seen this guy in a while. Originally showing up in World Chalice Explained, this little goober is great for summoning out fresh material for your link climbing while protecting said monsters, a perfect addition to a deck full of normal monsters. In this deck we have a few less vanillas, but our monsters are still going to end up being linked very often, so we'll be making a lot of use out of its in-hand effect. And while we do have less targets for its revival effect, all we need is a single target for it. So once Justicia or the normal dragon of your choice hits the grave of any level, then you have some free material to work with. And no, my stance has not changed. This is still a very precious little guy. It's just, you never realize how quick they're gonna grow up until it happens. Guardragon Garmedes is a level 3 earth monster with 1600 attack and 1000 defense, and if any number of normal monsters are sent to your grave except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is in your grave, you can send a dragon monster from your hand to the grave to add this card to your hand. Hey, free summon from hand whenever you fulfill that vanilla's going to grave condition, that's nice. And the recovery effect actually works really well with Promenesis, especially if it has no targets for its effect, cause for that little unit, all that matters is that it ends up in the grave. And because it never gets banished that way, as long as you have dragons to discard, you can keep doing this over and over again to recycle Garmedes. Heck, if you can get one in hand and one in grave, discarding a normal dragon will recover the Garm in grave while summoning the one that was already in your hand. And once that summoned one goes to the graveyard for whatever reason, you now have 2 Garms in the exact same place, giving you a bit of a resource loop. It's not exactly a highly valuable move, but hey, no Garm, no foul. Guardragon Andrake is a level 4 wind monster with 2000 attack and 600 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by a card effect. If this card is special summoned from the hand or deck, you can double this card's original attack and defense until the end of the next turn. And if this card is special summoned from the grave or banished zone, you can target a monster your opponent controls and destroy it. This is an interesting piece of design, but will make more sense once we get to the extra deck monsters. It being a special summon only monster that's level 4 is intensely infuriating, but the payoff is either removal or a potentially 4000 attack monster, which clears a lot more than you might think. In fact, in a world without the plethora of dragon support cards this could otherwise lean on, this would make for a pretty substantial boss monster, and that's not something I'm joshing about Andrake. World Legacy Guardragon Mardark is a level 9 wind dragon monster with 2600 attack and 3000 defense, and can be special summoned from the hand by banishing 2 normal monsters from your hand or grave. While on the field, your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack and defense for each dragon monster you control, and if this card on the field is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can add from your grave to your hand a level 9 monster with a different original type and attribute than this card has. Dang, I guess extracting the darkness from the dragon puppy had its consequences, huh? Mardark fits into the level 9 theme of the later World Legacy cards, but still does a fantastic job of fitting into Guardragons. The debuff can stack up fairly quickly, and with it already being at 2600, not a lot is gonna top this. But let's not forget that it also has a very good defense stat, so good on it for not only being a Guardragon that's actually a dragon, but is also good at guarding. I will, however, be docking points for being named Mardark and having the wind attribute. Your ticket's in the mail. Alright, that's all of our main deck monsters, now it's time to cover the extra deck ones. And this will be a fairly concise section, since we can talk about 3 of them in relatively quick succession. Guardragon LP is a Link 1 Dark monster requiring a level 4 or lower dragon monster as material. While on the field, you can't special summon monsters except dragons, and during your main phase, you can special summon a dragon monster from your hand or deck to your zone that 2 or more Link monsters point to. And you can only special summon Guardragon LPs once per turn. To complement that, we have Guardragon Pisty, who has all the same text as LP, but special summons one of your dragons that is either banished or is in your grave. Another notable piece of info is that LP has a left-pointing arrow, while Pisty has a right-pointing one. So the idea would be to place these 2 cards one zone away from each other to fulfill that requirement. This also brings to light exactly how you're supposed to use Andrake. If you don't have access to any better dragon payoffs, you can use either of their effects to get a massive beat stick or spot removal, depending on who you use to summon it. But we're not done yet, because next is Guardragon Agripane, a Link 2 dragon monster with 1500 attack, requiring any 2 dragon monsters as material, and it has all the same text as the past 2 links, but summons a dragon directly from the extra deck to an extra monster zone or main monster zone that has the same arrow requirements. With an upward and downward pointing arrow, this is most comfortable in the EMZ, with either LP, Pisty, or both pointing to the zone right beneath it. Though keep in mind that none of these monsters have to summon to a zone they point to on top of their other requirements. So if there's another viable zone completely isolated from your Guardragons, these effects are still live. So, having seen these, you can probably guess what kind of tomfoolery was committed with these cards. LP dragged out free dragons from the deck like Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, while Pisty could get back used dragons like Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, even if they had been banished at some point for a card like Chaos Dragon Levianeer. Gosh, I am so happy they finally eroded Red Mid. But Agripane was the worst of the bunch because, as it turns out, there are a lot of good dragons in the game that live in the extra deck. Thankfully, some of the most egregious ones like the Delta Excel monsters must be synchro summoned, which this doesn't bypass, but you could still get your hands on Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, Ancient Fairy Dragon, or probably the scariest of them all, Borland Dragon. And that's why most of these cards are now banned, with you being unable to play Agripane and LP, which is pretty funny. Since the Link 1s act as the wings to the Link 2, I'm now imagining Pisty just flopping around like a wet noodle to get anywhere. It's kind of funny. Our last extra deck specimen is World Chalice Dragon Almerduk, a level 9 wind fusion monster with 3000 attack and 2600 defense, requiring 3 Link monsters as material. It must first either be fusion summoned, or special summoned from your extra deck by tributing the above cards you control, in which case you don't use polymerization. This card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each, and when an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's monster, you can banish a Link monster with the same Link rating as that monster from your field or grave to destroy that opponent's monster, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. This is another holdover from the World Chalice video, and we found ourselves in an interesting position because this works equally well with both themes. If all of the Guardragon links were still legal, you could do all of your summon cheating shenanigans, then turn all of them into this massive monster, at which point if your opponent has any Link 1 or 2 monsters, they become quite easily dispatched. If ever a giant Link spam deck ever becomes popular, expect this to come out both as counterplay or as a potential payoff. But until then, this Duke is still decidedly dethroned. Alright, now that we've taken an extra deck break, let's get back to the main deck and talk about some spells and traps. Guardragon Reincarnation is a quick play spell card that fusion summons any fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing materials listed on it that are all Link monsters from your field or grave. So, as a battle trick, this is pretty saucy. Attack with a whole bunch of Link monsters, then cash them all in for a 3000 attack monster to do even more damage. Heck, if you've been Link climbing and you have 3 in the grave offhand, then that's all the material you need right there. This is clearly meant as a way to summon Almerduk, though because the only requirement is that the material be Link monsters, you could potentially make a huge range of fusions with this card. I'll leave it up to you to find out what wacky hijinks you can get up to by splashing this into other themes like, oh, I don't know, Altergeist, but the bottom line is that any Link deck can have access to Almerduk with this card without having to tribute them right off of the field, meaning they have a funny little anecdote and potentially a really profitable IP. That time I got reincarnated as a Guardragon. World Legacy Guardragon is a continuous spell card that, when activated, can target a level 4 or lower dragon monster in your grave and add it to your hand or special summon it. And once per turn, you can target a dragon monster you control and move that monster you control to another of your main monster zones. Whenever you bring up busted Guardragon cards, this has to be at the top of your mind, because this is outrageous. It being usable to recover any level 4 or lower dragon means you get to revive cards like Rocket Tracer or Red Rose Dragon, both of which are absolute bops to have back in rotation. Heck, Rocket Tracer can even use this card as fodder for its summoning effect. The icing on top is the zone changing effect, letting you align your Guardragon links, or I guess Link singular nowadays, without having to worry about how your Link arrows determine where you initially summon them. And because it's a World Legacy card, it can be searched by a variety of other effects, so not only is it powerful, it's very accessible. It's also just good to know that Imduk here is gonna be okay. I already have a hard enough time dealing with the damage sound effect for it on Master Duel. Making its passing a key part of the theme would have just been really cruel. Guardragon Shield is a field spell card that has you targeting a dragon monster you control, and it gains attack and defense equal to the total link rating of all link monsters currently on the field times 100 until the end of your opponent's turn. And once per turn, if exactly one dragon monster you control would be destroyed by a battle or guard effect, you can send a normal monster from your hand or deck to the grave instead. Now, this is actually really funny to me, because even if you get, or could get, all 3 of your on-theme link monsters onto the board, this only gets you a 400-point boost, which isn't exactly thrilling. It does count link ratings in general, including your opponent's, but for on-theme, this card isn't giving you much of a boost, though that can always be bolstered by off-theme monsters. The protection effect is much more interesting, because if you send that normal monster to the grave, you can special summon Promenesis from the grave and Garmedes from hand, all while giving you a little extra padding against interaction. And thank goodness that effect is decent, because if the shield part of Guardragon Shield didn't function, I'd have to go get a refund. Guardragon Cataclysm is a normal trap card that tributes a dragon monster, then targets 2 cards on the field and destroys them. Yep, it's a dragon-flavored Icarus attack. A slightly worse Icarus attack, since this has a hard once per turn restriction on it, but considering the designers actually know how to use those now, it makes sense. There isn't much more to say here from a mechanic standpoint. Don't be surprised if this crops up in a few dragon lists in the future, but what's cool from a lore perspective is that we get a global view of the planet here. And while the cloud cover is super annoying, you can tell where each world legacy is at, and thus where each battle took place. The center impact zone has World Wand and Arc, the north has Lance and Shield, to the south we have Chalice, Crown is to the east, and Armor is to the west. You can tell by matching up the colors to the kind of lighting that each World Legacy item has. And they said that geography isn't fun. Okay, I guess it's just this geography that's fun. Guardragon Core Awakening is a continuous trap card that lets you send an effect monster from your hand to the grave to special summon a level 4 or lower dragon normal monster from your hand, deck, or grave in defense position. Hey, that's pretty neat. Normal monsters, by their very nature, don't contribute much to how a deck functions. If a deck focuses on them, the other effects have to basically bend themselves over backwards to make them work. But with Core Awakening, you can effectively run as few copies as possible, then trade in effect monsters whenever you need to get a normal into rotation. Not to mention it works really well with World Legacy Guardragon, letting you revive any level 4 or lower effect dragon that you pitch. And being usable on both players' turns is a nice touch to help you get blockers. Though, you know, it is a trap card, and since the effect isn't hugely impactful enough to warrant the speed, you might not see or use it very much. But these multi-attribute dragons need all the help they can get, so make sure not to hit that snooze button, because this card is essential for waking up your elemental Guardragons. So that's all the Guardragon cards, but what do we do with them? Well, competitive events have answered this pretty handily. Take the parts that make Dragon Link work, and scrap the rest. But this is the GoldenNovaYugioh channel, where we try to find a way to make the core deck work. So while we'll be leaning on generic dragon support, we'll try to see how we can get dragons and normals to come together in beautiful harmony. So what can we play to help them out? Well, the intersection of normal and dragon brings to mind a very specific monster, which is why I'm calling for Tri-Horned Guardragon to be a new premier deck for the format. Okay, coping aside, Blue Eyes and Red Eyes both fit the bill extraordinarily well. However, with the Guardragon links having been limited to just Pisty, it's only going to help you revive any that you already have in rotation. The good news is that both decks have great engines for throwing them into the graveyard, giving you an outlet to activate the effects of Promenesis and Garmedes. But if we want to broaden our horizons a bit, Hieratic also lines up a lot with what Guardragons want to do. That deck tosses out dragon normal monsters at the drop of a hat, and with access to a Tum, you've got a bevy of dragons you can call on for reinforcements. An interesting bit of synergy actually comes from our friends over in Crusadia, as Spatha feels like it was custom made as a backup World Legacy Guardragon. If you summon Crusadia Draco to its link point, you can link it into Pisty, then Spatha's effect can move it one zone over. And now the Dragon Summon effect is online, because you have its side pointing arrow and Spatha's downward pointing arrow, which lets you get back Draco. Sadly, you're locked into summoning dragons until you get Pisty off the board, so you can either make a Link 2 dragon, or you can combine all of them together to make Boral Sword Dragon, whichever fits your fancy. We also can't forget about how they interact with World Chalice. Remember, most of the Guardragons care about normal monsters in general, not just dragon ones, so whenever you send members of that theme to the grave for Link summoning, that gets you a Guardragon activation. Not to mention there are, 2 members of their theme in that archetype. Like with Orcust, Guardragon spell and trap support isn't hidden among the World Legacy cards, but Monstrosity is great for getting Mardark out of the hand, Succession is always a bop, and World Legacy's Corruption gives you a replacement monster if your Guardragon links get offed. As for what World Legacy monsters would make for good text, World Arc is a great way to save your links and foolish your own cards, World Armor is always nifty for getting the World Legacy spells and traps, and World Lance can help your tiny monsters win out in battle, even against the largest of foes. And of course, we can't forget about Lib, the World Keyblade Master, as it does a great job of deploying those World Legacy spells and traps, especially if you incorporate the World Legacy monsters. As for a silly tech pick, well, I mean it is a dragon theme, and we do have every attribute aside from light. So let's bring in 5-headed dragon. Link climb a whole bunch, then cash them all in for a 5,000 attack and defense body with Dragon's Mirror. Or if you get them all out onto the field at once, you could link them into 5-headed Link Dragon instead. That way you can board wipe your opponent. You know, for fun. And that's all I have to say about Guardragons. While I'm optimistic about most archetypes and their potential future, it's hard to look at this theme and see a positive outlook. The main deck monsters aren't very impactful, and without 2 of their 3 power links, the deck has even less of a leg to stand on than before. Maybe Guardragons will find themselves incorporated into future support for other World Legacy themes, or maybe even get a massive rework themselves. But until such times come to pass, for all the enjoyers of these cards, it's gonna be a bit of a drag. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Guardragons pointed in the right direction, or are they normally like this? And which one is your favorite? They've got some pretty sweet designs, but I've got to go with Garmades myself. They look like some kind of wolf dragon. Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, make sure you like the video to boost it, subscribe to help the channel grow, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! To beat the algorithm. It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. When you want to protect your cards with the power of dragon scales, get some sweet lore for them, and support the channel, check out my link in the description to get started. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zagidel, Andrew Newman, A Random Pup, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Danny Bound, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh, Gloomba331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iskander711, John, Jordan, Julius Sneezer, Mana Charge, Marluxia's a Girl, Molly Renata, Nathan Vig, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Sir Knight JCB, Sky Buster Leo, Sophie, apparently, The Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Almento 5010, Aaron, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blue Gem, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Emily, Eva Padilla, Hake Boyagian, Herbal D, In the House Like Carpet, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Mega Combi, Michael Shimabukuro, Nadia McCarthy, Nitromo, Ruxith Sarani, Shizuka Nijimura, Star-Lord 777, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, Tucker Ordorn, and Zal Dureka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, participate in monthly custom card reviews, and just keep the lights on in general, please consider becoming a patron by using that link in the description or by becoming a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see more cards that are involved in the World Legacy storyline, make sure to check out this video I made covering World Chalice. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.